Dude, I remember I went to a house party one time. I got really, really drunk, and my blood dropped to like 25. And I I go to the because we just all brought food and put it on the coffee table, and I'm just going to town. I have like so many cocktails in me because they didn't just have sugary soda; it was all alcohol. So I just kept drinking more to raise my blood sugar.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
It was all, everyone was like, guys, he's fucking, I'm an animal. Look how much he's able to drink. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is awful, actually.
This sucks. I'm in pain. I'm suffering, and you're going chug, chug, chug.
No.
Jak and Daxter is probably one of the best platformers ever made. While it doesn't improve upon what the genre's already established, I think it implements existing tropes of the genre incredibly well. What it does is make the entire world completely seamless. In other words, the game has no loading screens, which I don't think had been done up to this point. The entire world is one continuous stretch of land where you can seamlessly walk from just about every area to another. Of course, there are exceptions, such as driving the boat to Misty Island or taking the teleporter to Geyser Rock, but for the most part, you can walk from one half of the world to the other. The other zones are visible from each other as well, meaning from the peak of Snowy Mountain, you can see the top of the Forbidden Jungle Temple, Misty Island, and Geyser Rock. There are other locations too, but you get the picture. I'd never seen a game do this until Dark Souls. It's a game that I've played, beaten, 100%ed, randomized, 100%ed while randomized, and platinumed several times on 2 different systems. I love Jak and Daxter. Jak 2 is a steaming pile of shit, but it's a pile that lives rent-free in my head because I want to love it as much as I love the first game. I've only ever seen 2 sides of people when talking about Jak 2. You either love it and it's the best in the series, or you're like me and you hate it. I thought I liked Jak 2 until I replayed it about 10 years ago. Ish. I hadn't played it in years prior to that point. The last time I had would have been when I was about 11 years old, maybe? I fully blame Jak 2 for being the reason why we haven't seen this series in such a long time. Yes, Jak 3, Jak X, Lost Frontier, Daxter, those games exist, but some of them actually feel like games worth playing since they're salvaging an incredibly wild tonal shift between Jak and Daxter and Jak 2. With those games, they're trying their best to continue a story that came out of fucking nowhere, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I want to make it clear up front that I don't think the tonal shift was a horrible idea, just a bold idea that I don't think paid off in the long run. Jak and Daxter felt like an adventure with your best friend that turns really serious really fast at the end. It's a good time with a bud for the majority of the journey. You run around, collect shit, number go up is very important, you meet some really interesting characters, and once the journey is done and you've collected everything you could possibly collect, the door opens to reveal a path of endless possibilities of the future. Jak 2 begins with the gang about maybe 6 months after the first game ends, and the 100 cell doors open to Top Gall and Maya's Citadel. As with seemingly every story that runs out of ideas in the early 2000s, the object behind the door is a time portal. Time travel. The gang set out for an adventure for other timelines, but quickly realize what they've opened is a portal to hell. Creatures fly forth from the portal, and Samos lets on some cryptic knowledge that we're not supposed to know yet. A creature larger than the rest pokes its head out through the portal, threatening to kill everyone right on the spot when Jak launches their cart forward and directly into the open portal. This portal splits the gang up, save for Jak and Daxter, where they land in the heart of a dystopian city. The cops show up and arrest Jak on the spot while Daxter runs away. 2 years pass and Daxter finds Jak in the prison of Baron Praxis, the ruling regent of Haven City. Prior to this moment, Jak was a mute. He did not speak. This game makes him speak, which I do think is a good change going forward. It's hard to continue a character if they don't talk unless being mute is somehow a core part of who that character is. The type of game Jak 2 became is a far cry from the previous entry. The main inspiration for this tonal shift was the release of GTA 3, and its mission structure is exactly the same, where we roam a pretty big open city, going to quest markers where characters will have a mission for us. The quality of the missions is pretty varied as well. Maybe sometimes good, maybe sometimes shit. I'll get to some of those individual missions in a bit. First, I just want to talk about Haven City. Jak and Daxter had a very vibrant and well-connected world that felt very good to explore. Jak 2 takes this concept and chucks it into the fucking garbage. The worst part of Jak and Daxter was probably the precursor basin where you had to pilot the zoomer for a level. The upside was it was only one level. In Jak 2, the only way to get from one point to another is with the zoomer. I guess you could walk, but holy fuck. The zoomer doesn't do well in tight spaces, and tight spaces are all of Haven City. They made us drive this awful pile of shit in a maze and said don't crash. There are two modes to use in these things, flight mode and hover mode. It's just two different elevations with their own sets of problems. Flight mode means you'll run into other cars. Hover mode means you'll run into pedestrians or cops. Running into pedestrians is incredibly fickle, as some of them have collision when you hit them, which cause you to bump and your car flies off into some random direction that you don't want to go, or sometimes that won't happen and you'll just go right through them. Cops always have collision, but you don't want the cops on you. That's just generally speaking as well. If you suspect the cops are following you, you're probably going to get the shit kicked out of you, and there's nothing you can do about it because we don't fire cops for breaking the law. There are a few different zones in Haven City, but all of them are tight, cramped, maze-like structures that still require the use of the zoomer to navigate reasonably. It's really just what color do you want the maze to be while blowing up your 18th zoomer for the day. Again, I understand that we're in a dystopian city. It's meant to be a dull and drab-looking place, but that doesn't mean it has to be boring to navigate. Night City in Cyberpunk is also a dystopian city, maybe with a little more neon, but a dystopia nonetheless. And while I dislike Cyberpunk for other reasons, the city isn't one of them. I never felt bored driving around. I wasn't excited either. It just felt like driving. Jak 2's Haven City has nothing going on in it. There's no reason to explore anything at any time because there's nothing to find. There's no reason to make a turn down any side streets. There's no reason to get out of the car when you think you can keep it from exploding. There's simply no reason for the city to exist outside of the story. I think they learned that at some point after Jak 3 because Daxter for the PSP does a pretty good job using the areas of Haven City as levels. They wanted the game to feel bigger after Jak and Daxter, but they didn't fill it with anything giving the player a reason to want to explore beyond the mission markers. In Jak and Daxter, there was always a reason to explore a bit off the beaten path, because maybe you would find a power cell which would lead to progress. In Jak 2, maybe there's an orb one could use to buy something in the secret shop of useless crap. Big head, no goatee, hero mode, fuck that. Give me Fat Jak and we'll talk. I would say Haven City is just a small part of why I hate Jak 2, but in reality, navigating this megastructure is half the game. Speaking of wasted potential, Jak has a new eco ability. In the first game, Jak has the ability to channel eco throughout his body, which gives him special abilities based on the properties of the eco he's swimming in. Eco is basically gone from Jak 2, but that doesn't mean there are no eco abilities. Dark Jak is Jak's new ability. His time in the Baron's prison meant that he was experimented on with Dark Eco. This explained his sudden personality shift, and it's a pretty sizable plot point that doesn't get fully addressed until Jak 3. That means for Jak 2, he can just shapeshift into a big blue version of himself with claws and shoots lightning, but they don't do anything with it. It's just a thing that you can do every so often, but it's never required to do at any point, save at the very beginning of the game. Don't get me wrong, it's very useful when surrounded by a lot of enemies, but so is the yellow eco gun or the shotgun. It's really just a dark bomb button when you don't feel like dealing with an encounter. They imply that Jak can't control his new form and that he just changes at random, but that doesn't happen. I'm not suggesting that they should have had Jak randomly change as you play. That would have gotten annoying really fast. But they could have done Dark Jak missions where he's super pissed and goes on a little rampage in an area. Anything that could have further stressed the point that Jak needs to get his new abilities under control. But from the moment the game starts, he's got full control over it with the ability to activate it whenever he wants. None of the other characters even react to this ability besides Daxter. You'd think seeing someone transform into a giant angry blueberry would be worth some discussion, but I guess everybody is Violet Beauregard in this city. Now that I'm thinking about it, this might be the inspiration for Sonic's Werehog in Sonic Unleashed. Maybe that's just a coincidence, but then again, Sonic did become a Super Saiyan. As edgy as Jak is, he's far from the edgiest character we interact with. This is Torn. He's the head of the slum sect of a resistance group fighting against Baron Praxis. He wishes so badly to be the kind of man Luthen Rael is. The first few missions we get are from him. There are 2 in this section that I want to talk about. The first is the trip to the pumping station. I gotta point out that Baron Praxis is really dumb if he keeps access to the city's water supply outside of the city walls. Haven City is under siege from an army of insectoid creatures known as metalheads, and the walls outside of Haven City are meant to protect it from them. It's safe to assume that most of the regions outside of Haven City are desolate hellscapes controlled by the metalheads, which means unless the Baron had someone invent a piss recycler, everyone inside the walls is dead from dehydration. Second is destroying the armory. I actually like this one. I don't like a lot of missions in the game, but this one's okay. The mission is decently difficult, but not too crazy as we don't have access to guns by this point. The main draw of the mission is that the camera angle takes on the perspective of the tank chasing us throughout the entire level. I just think it's neat, though it does lead to a good conversation about difficulty. A pretty big point of contention cited for whether someone likes Jak 2 or not is its difficulty. It's significantly harder than the previous game, and its checkpoint system sucks. Oftentimes, a failed mission, no matter how long, means that you'll be restarting all the way back from the very beginning. With missions that have little gimmicks that last almost 5 minutes, this really isn't an issue. In missions that can last 10, 15, even 20 minutes, failing can sometimes mean going all the way back to the very beginning. My problem more so lies with the health system over the checkpoint system. But don't get me wrong, I still hate the checkpoint system. Like in Jak and Daxter, we only have 4 hits from most enemies before dying. But the HUD doesn't support that idea, as there are 8 slots. There are enemies that deal only 1 peg of damage, but they don't populate most of the game. Most metalheads, and I think all Crimson Guards, do 2 pegs worth of damage. This is something that aggravates me, and I know it's basically nothing in the long run, but it gets on my nerves whenever I see it. Inaccurate numbers. This is something Ratchet & Clank does later on, and it still pisses me off, and I love those games. What's the point of having a large number representing your health if you die in 3 or 4 shots? What's the point of having 8 pegs of life when you die in only 4 shots? Why not just make it 4 pegs total? I know, this is a huge nothing burger, but I ultimately do realize that Jak just has 4 hits he can take, just like the last game. But that's not what's indicated by the HUD. If the HUD were accurate, we would have 8 hits. I don't think we need 8 hits, I would settle for 5. That would have been a nice balance between the most difficult missions and the shitty checkpoint system. My problem is that the game is fucking misleading in saying how much health Jak actually has. My personal biggest gripe has to be with the tone of the story. I like a dark story, I like an uplifting story, I like a humorous story. It's hard to blend them all together. Moments of levity are one thing, but there are times where I wonder what was going through Naughty Dog's mind when they made some of these missions and decisions. I mean, come on, we have several missions where Jak is working with the scummiest bastard in the entire city. Crew is a horrible man who basically turns anybody who works for him, by extension Jak, into slaves. We have missions where we have to root around in the sewers to destroy a security system which will allow Crew to exploit more people inside the city, alongside a mission where we have to ride a fucking skateboard through a mining drill. It's like they tried making some gimmicky missions that are supposed to be fun and different, but they just end up creating this weird narrative dissonance about the fact that we're literally fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against a fascist baron, and the other against a hive-minded insect man. But here we are, Tony Hanking our way across the city. Hey look, a section that reminds me of a more fun and superior game in every way. I'm not saying it has to be 100% depression all the time, but our moments of levity and fun should be at the act of the mission itself being a fun endeavor, or the characters having some really fun banter. There were a few that accomplished this, like climbing around the Palace Tower, which is a really good combination of platforming and challenging combat that does feel rewarding to finish, but nah. I gotta race the captain of the Crimson Guard throughout the city over the right to get my dick wet. I hate that they brought this guy back in Jak 3, by the way. He's such a nothing character whose only trait is that he wants to prove his cock is bigger than Jak's, despite the fact that Jak is literally an escaped terrorist. Every mission he's involved in is horrible. Some conversations between Jak and Daxter in slower moments are a little amusing, like Daxter getting drunk and telling off crew, but there are some that are just gross.
Whoa, she's a Betty. And she likes you, Jak. Not that I can account for her tastes. I bet you'd love to pin some medals on her chest, huh?
Daxter, that's genuinely disgusting. To further drive home my point, I want to talk about 2 more missions that I feel could not be more opposite while trying to feel similar. After doing missions for the Underground, Torn wants us to do a special mission for the Shadow, who's the real leader of the Underground. We have to go outside the walls to Dead Town to protect a sacred site from the Metalheads. Once the mission is done and we get to the sacred site, we discover that it's Samos' old hut and confirm that we've traveled a considerable distance into the future. You can also deduce that the Shadow that we've heard so much about by this point is likely Samos, but a young hippie version. It feels like such a major milestone of a mission that I do somewhat like for its story content that confirms to Jak and Daxter that this isn't some other world or another dimension. It's theirs. And it's dying from multiple forms of corruption that, when you think about it, they caused by opening the precursor portal. Contrast this mission with helping Brutor to save his fellow Lurkers. Lurkers are still around, but they're being used as slave labor by Baron Praxis. It's an interesting mission to think about because the boys have to learn to get over their prejudices against Lurkers for them nearly destroying their home in the first game, and work with them now for a greater cause. However, it's a segment that only lasts for 2 missions, and it takes place in the world map of Haven City. All of the best missions take place in their own designed levels, while all of the worst missions take place in the boring-ass Haven City streets. The goal of the mission is to drive all around town and pick up some Lurkers in your car, then bring them back to Brutor. This could have been so much better if it were its own mission in some mines somewhere, where we go and cause a prison riot of Lurkers. Even down to the Baron of Haven City, it seems the game cannot decide what it thinks of the man. He's such a cartoon villain that it's not even funny. On one hand, they have him torturing people, keeping slaves, and using the war as an excuse to stay in power, while on the other, he's shutting off the water supply to the slums for no reason other than fuck the poor. He's got his military searching for the keys to the Jewish space laser, and he's flying around in this contraption that looks like it came right out of Dr. Robotnik's laboratory. Meanwhile, his main guard captain, who's supposed to be out killing Jak, but instead he's out here trying to get in Kira's pants. And Jak's pants, but not for your average, everyday kind of fucking. He just wants to compare schlongs. My guy, I promise you, having a bigger dick than Jak isn't going to make your life any better. You're still going to be a vain, whiny baby man. None of this is mentioning how bad the gunplay is. The closest it comes to being like anything else is being like the first Ratchet and Clank game where you couldn't strafe and shoot at the same time, except it feels worse. I love the first Ratchet and Clank game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. The biggest difference between the two is Ratchet and Clank is the first of its series. They had a plan in mind of what the game was going to be, and they implemented the content well. There aren't a ton of weapons that require precision, but the ones that do are incredibly strong. It's also not a movement-based platformer. It's a third-person shooter adventure with platforming mechanics. Shooting is still part of the core design philosophy when it came to making Ratchet and Clank. Jak 2 is a platformer that now has guns in it, which it was not designed for. I say that it's bad, and it is, but I do have to give them credit for making a weapon system that tries to work with the movement options that Jak has. You're not going to be sitting behind cover or standing far away to try and make precise shots. A lot of the guns have moves that work with punching and spinning. There are 4 guns total, with 2 of them being useful in Jak's kit, while the other 2 are situationally useful. The Scattergun, the Blaster, the Vulcan Fury, and the Peacemaker. The Blaster and the Vulcan are both really nice for just about every encounter, whereas I never found a use for the Peacemaker. And the Scattergun I only ever used until the Blaster unlocks, or I run out of Blaster ammo. Again, I have to give them credit for trying, but it just doesn't work very well. Jak 3 took all of these weapons and made them quite a bit more useful. The Scattergun eventually shoots a ring on the ground around Jak, the Blaster gets bouncing bullets, shit like that. Ultimately, I think it's putting a band-aid on a brain injury, but I have to give them credit for trying. And besides, there are way too many turret sections for the best entry in the series. The reason I keep coming back to Jak 2 is because I want it to be good. I want to like it. And I like to replay it every couple of years or so to see how new experiences in my life would change my perspective on things, and to see what I would do to change things and make the game better. Of course, it'll never happen, it's speculation, but speculation is just part of the fun for me. I don't have a huge issue with the sudden time jump. I used to, but I don't anymore. There are interesting stories and plot lines in here that they talk about, but they don't bring any closure regarding them, instead opting to force this story where Jak has to protect a younger version of himself, since he's supposed to be the actual heir to Haven City's throne. But of course, a child can't run a city, so they toss his ass in a time portal so the adult Jak can be the one to take the place of child Jak. This whole plotline could have been thrown out entirely and it would have made the story a lot better. Child Jak serves no real purpose. The purpose they give him is that he's the only one who can open the Precursor Stone for some reason. Why the stone needs to be opened is another thing they don't bother explaining. The Metalhead leader wants to eat it, but that whole plotline doesn't need to exist. Child Jak doesn't need to exist in this timeline. Child Jak could have been born in Sandover, with some random chosen one shit being the reason why he can channel Eco so well as he does. That's actually what it was until this game came out. While it's not the greatest way of explaining it, it's better than him being from the future than being sent back to the past with hippie Samos just for him to grow up and go back to the future. Son of a bitch. This game is really just a convoluted sequel to Back to the Future, isn't it? I don't see why the events of Haven City and its war have to be completely centered around Jak. I know he's the main character, and we have to develop him somehow, but why does he have to be the reason for the Metalhead siege? Jak should simply exist in a world that operates outside of his existence. He has his own problems to deal with since Praxis fucked him up in prison, or the obvious goal of going the fuck home back to his own timeline. But he's from this timeline. No, he's not. Shut up. They came up with that out of nowhere for this game. Another plotline I really want to talk about that's really important to the story behind the scenes is where the Baron is supplying Eco to the Metalheads in order to keep the war going long enough to justify his seat of power. I would have loved to see a revolution from within. Yes, we have the underground, but those are specifically resistance fighters. I want to see the people take back their city and unify for a final defense against the Metalhead leader. They could have even kept the big super fuck-off gun if they really wanted to, but the child has to die. I wouldn't reference Fable 3 for very many things, but it has a better revolutionary story than what Jak 2 gave us, which is nothing. They even have the same plot points, and somehow Fable 3 does it better. Even the gameplay and the story are split between the type of game they wanted to make and the type of story they wanted to tell. Telling a story with many breaks in between to Roma City can be done. Look at GTA, they do just fine. The difference is that GTA's world has shit to do in it, and shit to look at. It wants you to know the city you're going to be doing shit in. Jak 2 wants the same, but simultaneously has us traveling outside of the city in zones that have nothing to do with the greater city that we've been driving around in. And when it does have us do a mission inside the city, on the streets we've been driving on, they're relegated to more of what we've already done in the city anyway. We drive from point A to point B. We race a guy from point A to point B. We destroy some guns that we've already been destroying since you can't avoid the police forever. We destroy some cop cars that we've already been destroying since you can't avoid the police forever. You get the picture. We can't become attached to Haven City because there's nothing to get attached to. All of the most compelling missions exist in a vacuum outside the city. It can be difficult to pull all of the pieces of the story together when every single one has this long drive from one half of the maze to the other. All of the tension from the previous mission is now gone because we have to stop and drive to the next marker. We can't continue working for Crew right now because we've exhausted all of his missions for this segment. We can't continue this line of missions until Torn gets what he needs. We can't continue working for Torn now because Jak wants to do his own thing for a little while and get inside the palace. We can't kill the Baron right now because Crew is ready to continue his storyline. We're getting pulled in so many different directions at once, it can be difficult to keep up with what one was doing with Crew when you've been working with Torn or Core or Onan simultaneously, while stretching that time further by a long car ride in the grayness of the maze. Now this can be a good thing. It can be an amount of time that the game gives us to digest what we just did, and what that means going forward if, and only if, the mission actually had anything to do with the story whatsoever. A good third of the game's missions could be cut entirely because it's all busy work. There's no real purpose in going to the palace the first time to fight the Baron if we don't kill him. The information we learned was information we already had. The Baron was supplying eco to metalheads. There's no reason to return to the pumping station with Sig so Crew can have more metalhead trophies. Who cares? There's no reason to race in Haven City Raceway because we already turned on the old elevator that leads inside the palace where we could just send one guy, Jak, to open the front fucking door and make an actual fucking assassination attempt against the Baron. There's no reason to destroy the blast bots, at all. If you know that they're coming, then leave the hideout, you dumb bastards. There's no fucking reason to race Errol in the streets of Haven City. I feel like I don't have to justify why there's no fucking reason for that mission to exist, but I will. Because he's supposed to be killing Jak, not having a dick-measuring competition with him. Yes, I know. It shows that he's incredibly prideful and arrogant. We know. Who gives a shit? I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. I don't think that there's nothing great about Jak 2. I have missions that I love from it. Particularly the mission that reminds me of Jak and Daxter, what a coincidence. The goal is to collect 3 artifacts from the Precursor Ruin outside the city walls. It's a very pleasant zone to be in with some really pretty music. Of course there are metalheads there, but they're everywhere. They're inside the city when they're not supposed to be. But this segment shows that they were capable of still creating a beautifully made platforming section that combines both old and new elements. It has its problems, namely the RNG rock slide of Doom and Dix, but I don't find it overwhelming like the rest of the game. There aren't hordes of monsters or guards coming out of the woodwork to touch my bingus, and I appreciate that it's a relatively calm and more true-to-form segment that knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to be GTA, it's not trying to be Tony Hank, it's not trying to be Need for Speed or Driver or whatever. It's just being what it's always been. A platformer where you collect shit. I also like Core's character despite how obvious they make it.
Is that blackface, dude?
No, you don't understand. I'm literally a forest demon from across the bridge. This isn't a costume.
He's secretly the metalhead leader disguised as a human. I say secretly, but the way he talks about metalhead invasions is borderline fetishistic. He's posing as a high-ranking member of the Underground and is using them to weaken the Baron's defenses around the city. And I like the more we do work for him, the more we slowly realize that we're weakening the city's defense grid, which in turn allows the metalheads to get in. I like that he's also the opposite of the Baron's character. He's everything that Praxis thinks he is. Don't get me wrong, Praxis is a tyrant and he has a stranglehold on Haven City, but Core has a stranglehold on Praxis, while simultaneously keeping his grip loose enough to make Praxis think that he's still in control of his own city. I think the metalheads are a hive mind of sorts, or at the very least they just follow the strongest member of their number, which is obviously Core. Core's confidence in this fact also allows him to lead his armies from inside the city walls with only one order: siege the city and prod its defenses on the outside. In the meantime, he's playing all 3 sides of the war by forcing the Baron to give his forces eco and sabotaging the city's defenses from the inside by using the underground. He's genuinely a great character, probably the smartest in a sea of dumbasses. While replaying Jak 2 and questioning the purpose of half the game, I find myself questioning why some characters even need to exist. Of course, I don't think Errol needs to exist. He doesn't do anything. I don't think Child Jak needs to exist because, again, he doesn't do anything. The game brings him up whenever it wants to remind you that he exists and is relevant to the plot because they want him to be, not because he actually is. And strangely enough, I don't think Daxter needs to exist either, at least not this version of him. He makes sense in Jak and Daxter as more than simple comic relief because Jak is mute. He acts as a sort of mouthpiece to Jak, much like Pecker is to Onan. Not a very good mouthpiece, but the two are practically inseparable even before Daxter's transformation. I think it's safe to say that Daxter knows Jak better than anyone. In this current iteration, Daxter is only utilized as comic relief. Jak talks now, he can speak for himself, which makes Daxter wasted potential. Think about it, what does Daxter actually do that Jak couldn't do himself? Remember how I said I wanted Dark Jak to be more of an influence on the story? Some characters do bring it up, but there's never any real conversation about it. Kira mentions that she doesn't like this new Jak and how he changes when he gets angry, and Jak's only response is, "It's been a rough time." Yeah, okay, I get it, but isn't this one of your childhood friends, a crush of yours, someone you could probably talk to about these sorts of things? Never mind that Daxter is literally his best friend who has the potential to be humanity on Jak's shoulder. If they leaned into Dark Jak essentially having a mind of its own and being this nigh uncontrollable beast, we could have had plenty of scenes where Jak is struggling to keep his humanity. On one hand, these powers make fighting the Metalheads and the Barons so much easier, but they come at a cost where he's constantly angry and lashing out at the people he cares about. Daxter could have had a more emotional role in this entry in trying to keep Jak grounded in humanity. I don't buy that this isn't that kind of emotional game when it's literally what they're trying to do. They just didn't write anything to expand on it. Saying that it's been a rough time isn't enough. I also won't buy that the teens who this game targeted wouldn't understand because they're the ones who would be the most likely to understand. I was a teenager once, as were we all, and if for some reason you haven't yet, why are you here? You will be. Chemicals and shit make things extremely confusing as we go through this development phase of our lives. Some people are more external with whatever emotions they exhibit, some are more internal. Whichever group you fall into, a plot point about retaining humanity is an extreme example of choosing the type of person you want to be beyond the period of adolescence. I would extend this to anybody at any time, as we're all growing even if not physically anymore. Our brains change as new information enters and we learn new things. I like to try and end with as much positivity as I can. Even though I don't like Jak 2, I can't say that all of it is horrible. They had a vision of what they wanted with their story to become, but didn't know how to make it happen. At least that's the impression that it gives off. Despite how jarring the change in tone was, I think the future story has something worth telling. The problem is that they pulled the game in so many different directions that it lost what made Jak and Daxter so special in the first place. Jak 2 is a crisis of identity. It's a game that doesn't know what it wants to be, but sees all these other titles out there at the same time that were pushing the envelope of their respective genres and said, I can do that too, without realizing that it didn't have to. My hatred for Jak 2 isn't really hatred at all when we get down to it. It's disappointment in what the product actually was, and disappointment in myself for having the inability to enjoy it for what it has to offer. But that's because what it offers was never its to give. I hate that I hate Jak 2 because I want to like Jak 2, but I can't because it's not what I grew to love from Jak and Daxter. My name is Box. Please like and subscribe. My voice hurts. And have a wonderful day.